I had questions, but I didn't know who to turn to, and no one seemed to have any answers.
This upload is on Fairmormon's site with permission to them from Mormon Challenges. I'm sure the permission was real tough to get. I kind of got into it with one of their professors a while back on their explanations on how things can be explained away when we get to church history, etc. When you've got basically unlimited funds, as the church does, you can make some very nice and professionally acted out, in this case, dramas, which will use very subtle means to persuade us that the church is not actually hiding anything, probably protecting us a little bit, that the members of the church who are involved in this are always super sincere, and the impressions about those of us who have investigated the truth and our true intentions, and even if we're trying to be good, well, we just don't have the spirit, and we're led into deception by Satan. And let's just take a look here and see how powerful these techniques are to form opinion that really we shouldn't probably delve into church history or use the sites that guys like me would use or create, because, well, it's very difficult. But fortunately, we've got Fair Mormon, and if we we trust their apologetics, we can eventually come to know that although things are complicated, we'll have to rely on the Spirit, which is what we always get to, because the facts just don't work. But I want to point out some things. This kind of irritated me, watching the subtle means by which this dishonesty is promoted, and by which sentiment against efforts of those of us who are portrayed in this are, of the devil so subtly. Let's see how subtle the church is in this. Yes, I'm calling it the church, even if it's produced by a sub-organization at BYU.
Want to talk to Dad? Because I knew it would hurt him, and because he's sometimes opinionated on subjects that he knows nothing about. But he was retired, and on occasion he helps me with projects I was doing to get through school. So he was available.
Something bothering you?
Remember Ryan?
Yeah. How's he doing?
I left the church.
Really? What happened?
I don't know. He, a little while back he got caught up, in some websites that just threw him off.
Pornography?
So here, a caring, loving father, but he's using some of the typical rhetoric the church gives us. It must have been pornography. He wanted to sin. But we're going to be drawn in by the sincerity of both these individuals. And so the son's going to finally get to the point, but it's difficult because he's been delving into anti-Mormon literature. His dad understands. And he knows this is important, so he's going to take a break. These are super sincere people, which could be the case. But we'll watch. Everything's done in a very subtle fashion. What happened? What happened to his testimony? How did Satan take this good young man's testimony. Was he delving into areas that would deny him of the Spirit, that would make his magic charm garments less effective because he didn't have faith or exercise agency correctly?
No. Websites like dealing with the church, like Joseph Smith stuff.
Let's take a break.
Subtly in the background, we've got a version of Canon in D or Canon in E, Pachelbel, a very spiritually poignant song, helping us to feel how important this is.
These videos he watched, they weren't produced by the church, were they?
No. No, they weren't.
Did you watch any?
I don't know, I thought I could help and kind of understand where he was coming from, so yeah, I've watched him.
Okay, so he's excusing himself and delving into something not produced by the church. Mistake number one. That's what undermines our faith, is going out into these dangerous waters. There's all sorts of little subtle inferences being made here. This is well done, and yeah, it helps form sentiment.
I tried to bring this up in Sunday school to get some answers for Ryan, but the teacher seemed a little disturbed by my questions, and someone just suggested I speak to the bishop about it.
But the bishop is
So I tried talking to my bishop, but he didn't know anything about these things. And since I was the Elders Quorum president, I was sure that the bishop would mention my concerns to the stake president, and that I'd be getting a lecture about the Articles of Faith or something.
A lecture about the Articles of Faith or something. So we're getting drawn in here if we're on the youthful side, which is, maybe who this is mostly intended for, millennials or something. We can identify with this because, those old dudes probably give me a lecture on the Articles of Faith or something like that. Wanted to make sure my CTR ring was still fitting, that I've been saying my family prayers.
What did you think?
Honestly, it actually seems pretty compelling. And really, I've just been feeling that, it feels like we've been lied to.
I see.
Okay, so we're acknowledging and validating that many people who are decent, sincere people are getting caught in this web of problems that come from learning about church history. And these aren't, we're acknowledging that these aren't just people that wanted to, go out to the Kiss concert and then have an orgy at the Satanic Temple afterwards. There are people who are, honestly discovering things that they cannot easily reconcile to the assertion that an all-knowing, unchanging, and loving God is guiding the LDS Church, or through his Son, who's a God, I guess. So we're validating there. So we're making it look like we're not just fluffing these people off. We're really going to be trying to understand them and give them some acknowledgement. But like I said, so we're going to use subtleties. We're not going to be going, oh, those damn anti-Mormons, they're all from the devil, and they're super evil. And so no, because then that creates sentiment against the person who's criticizing those poor misguided souls who walk into the quandary of anti-Mormonism, and even the title, The Effect of Anti-Mormonism. So eventually you're going to just feel, possibly, if they're successful, that it's such a tragedy that people who are lost open their big mouths on YouTube and share this disease with others when they're not properly inoculated through fairmormon.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't know. I did the scouting thing, I did seminary, went on a mission, go to institute classes. I hustled to get to these devotionals, and I've never, ever heard any of these things brought up before. So it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like they're withholding stuff from us, and I just don't know who I can trust. And I'm sorry, and I've tried to get over it, with praying and reading scriptures and going to the temple, all that, listening to the Spirit. It just doesn't, I just can't trust it like I used to,
Listening to the Spirit, and the Spirit didn't tell you, huh? Okay. So he's trying, he's making an effort. But we're gonna have to acknowledge the fact that these things are challenging. We can see he's a good, honest-looking, hard-working, clean cut. That means you're good. He's not a long-haired, hippie freak, rebel. But these are valid issues.
And I don't know. I just really like some answers.
Have you talked to Jessica about this?
So he feels a little betrayed here. Why are they hiding it from him? Well, maybe it's just for our own good. So Daddy jumps in. Have you talked to Jessica about this, his wife? Because, of course, there's no, patriarchy going on in Mormonism. Dad wants to make sure that they're united, functioning as the Lord would have them, in partnership, even if that Holy Ghost isn't being a very good partner right now. And now we're going to see how it undermines his marriage, that he's gotten into this and didn't share it, of course, with his wife, not treating her as an equal.
She'd freak out if I told her. I'd answered lots of questions about the church when I was a missionary. So had Ryan. I'd had to explain the usual things, blacks in the priesthood, polygamy, and some questions I just put on the shelf, like Joseph Smith's plural wives.
Nice how those things are characterized. The usual things, blacks in the priesthood, polygamy. And now they're redundant and say, but some things I had to put on the shelf, like Joseph Smith's plural wives. Polygamy, plural wives. They're going to differentiate here. Oh, but, those polygamy and, Negroes in the priesthood, no big deal. There's a good explanation for that. That's old stuff. But now, the Book of Abraham, that's brand new. Is it? Well, no, it isn't, actually. They're not going to really talk about how long the church has had, the papyrus restored by, was it the Smithsonian or, whatever. Yeah, it's like 1967 or something like that. Okay, don't quote me. But it's been quite a while. And they didn't rush out and put it right on the front of the LDS.org or in the ensign. Hey, guess what? The papyrus had nothing to do with Abraham. Yeah, so they were kind of withholding that just a little.
But these new questions, like about the Book of Abraham, were so much harder to answer. And when I tried putting these questions on the shelf, it all came crashing down. So yeah, I feel like one side is super aggressive on making their point, and the people that you would think would like care about it, like you just get silence.
Well, there's
Okay, so us on the anti-Mormonism spectrum, we're super aggressive, because we don't have the spirit, that's why. And then people who should care just are blowing it off for some reason. Maybe they've got too much faith.
always more than one side to an argument.
Dad's so understanding.
I have this friend in the ward. Remember Todd Mortensen? Best scholar on the scriptures I know, especially the Book of Abraham. Would you like to talk to him?
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Thanks, Dad. Seriously. Yeah, it's kind of hard talking about this, and it's good having someone you can talk to, and I've just felt really alone, and so thank you. You okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. But you really ought to talk to your wife.
Yeah.
So, his wife asks him, "How long have you been checking this stuff out?" "Oh, 6 months, and you've been hiding it from me?" She feels betrayed, but eventually they'll get back together after she doesn't talk to him, and he doesn't, well, anyway. It's a lousy week for him, we'll just say that. Because, at least he's learning that you've got to be, treating your wife like an equal. And because that's what the church has really always promoted, Dad knows that. And all those anti-Mormons, they're trying to tell us that we're a bunch of, misogynists in the priesthood. But no. The church has always promoted, openness and equality. It's just a misconception. So, finally, they'll get to talk with Mr. Book of Abraham expert, who's going to tell us essentially that if you're not an Egyptologist, you're just really not qualified to contemplate these things. So it probably was better, I guess, is inferred, that the church didn't inform you this because it would, just confuse you and mess up testimonies that, otherwise should be growing in the gospel, the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, as Quacku likes to program us with. So eventually they'll just say, I'm sure a lot of those folks are sincere. They just don't realize that what Joseph Smith was translating wasn't it wasn't from the same papyrus. It just wasn't, that we've got proof that indicates that, evidence that indicates that. So, we don't know what he was translating, but it wasn't what was returned by the Smithsonian, or that's just led to all these misconceptions. Of course, the kid had brought up the fact that Joseph Smith invented, gave a translation of the Egyptian alphabet, which was also complete, mastodon waste. He got nothing right. So they'll just not deal with that. The other thing they won't deal with is the fact that whatever Joseph Smith came up with in the Book of Abraham, with all his inspiration, based on something that they're saying wasn't really the same facsimiles and so forth, which I completely disagree with, but that really doesn't matter, because it's filled with false information. So if he gets this inspiration from the God of Israel, it's still filled with false information, which we've gone over so many times. I'm not going to really get into that. But just for the sake of giving a couple of things, I will, since these guys avoid a lot of specifics, because the specifics lead to people investigating the issues. And so they just make it sound like, a bunch of that, stuff about Joseph Smith, So there are anachronisms in the book of Abraham. A number of them. Whether it's the Chaldeans, which Joseph Smith obviously copied out of the Bible, whether it's him using the name Jehovah, whether it's Jehovah addressing Abram as Abraham, whether it's using Greek words like Egypt and then giving false definitions to Egypt and also to Pharaoh, whether it's ridiculous science like the stars borrowing their light from the revolutions of Kolob and other stuff I went into like yesterday. The point is, my points are that they generally avoid giving specifics because specifics are the problem. The devil is in the details. And when you do look at the specifics, they show that an all-knowing, unchanging God did not give a correct translation or information of any sort to Joseph Smith. That's the problem. Okay? And so a technique is to control the argument. That's exactly what the church does in so many of these different issues. With the book of Abraham, they make it about something else. None of those things really matter when you get to the bottom line, which is whatever the hell he translated or got inspired by, it gave him false information. Yeah, so we'll avoid focusing on that is what they do. Then they confuse us and say, you got to be an expert on Egyptology, or you got to be an expert in DNA, or whatever it is. So that the bottom line is you really are going to have to pray about this, and you're going to have to choose to believe. We're going to find evidence that favors us, as they say, and evidence that doesn't, but somehow we'll decide that evidence that doesn't disprove it, even though once Jesus lies, he's not God anymore by his own standards. But we'll avoid those topics. And then we'll paint these other people in a picture less sincere and less careful than our caring, faithful Latter-day Saint father here. I just want people to notice the subtleties, because when you get into Fair Mormon, they are professionals with this. And so apparently as Mormon challenges, the church has got unlimited funding, and this is well acted out. Remember, this is acting.
Maybe.
Oh, now come on, give her more credit than that. It'll do you good to talk to her. It's tough to feel alone.
It took me several days to decide how to tell Jess. I knew I had to, and that I had to tell her everything. I just didn't want to.
There you go.
Hey, Jess. Want to sit for a bit?
Yeah.
So you remember Ryan?
Ryan. Left the church, got kicked out of BYU.
Did you notice the eyes roll? Oh, Ryan, that Ryan, yeah. Got kicked out of BYU. Left the church. Bad decisions. Must not have been careful enough.
Yeah?
Well, didn't really get kicked out, but anyway, doesn't matter. Yeah.
Doesn't?
So, I've been trying to talk to him more, reach out to him, and he actually showed me some stuff about the church and about Joseph Smith and the Book of Abraham.
Okay.
And it's actually pretty compelling stuff. It's convincing, it's convincing against the church.
You're not having doubts about the church, are you?
No. Okay.
Yes, you are.
I don't know, actually.
You don't know? Okay, he just lied. These guys are good actors. This is being very professionally done. That there's some real talent here. And there are a lot of subtle messages being conveyed throughout.
I don't even know what that means, but I feel like I just want some answers, right? I feel like I haven't felt anything at church for a really long time. And I just get super annoyed when people just talk and they don't have any idea what they're talking about.
So, how long has this been bothering you?
Maybe 6 months.
6 months? You never told me?
You didn't trust me. You didn't. You're treating me like a lesser. Yeah, that's nice. Well, sometimes you feel that you have something dangerous and you might be trying to protect a loved one until you feel that you've been convinced that, this is something that you should present rather than go ahead and threaten their faith with something that may destroy their faith, and then you find that you've got an answer that you're satisfied with, but you've screwed somebody's faith up. And faith, in this case, is what we are taught and conditioned to believe makes us into better people, allows us to access the powers of heaven to bless our lives, to bless our children, to bless our marriage, to give us light and truth. And once we begin to doubt, we become worse people somehow. And that's going to dovetail into the Hallie Everett's second portion of the why families can't be together forever business. This whole thing right here is such a, for me, I didn't get the reaction that this guy's getting, but I had circumstances in which I labored, I struggled, I studied, and I had already had a long history of doing a lot of study of church literature and scriptures and that sort of a thing. So I had a lot more background, and I had an experience where I decided to share with my wife issues that really greatly troubled me regarding, in my case, the fact that Joseph Smith apparently had to go to Luciferian Freemasons and become initiated in a secret society whose god is openly taught to be Lucifer, in order to obtain portions of the LDS Temple endowment, when he could apparently go get a revelation from his dear Heavenly Father anytime he wanted to for anything. As we see in the Doctrine and Covenants, there's a revelation for just about anything. Anybody who wants to go on a mission, he'll ask God where they should go. Emma gets pissed off because she's tired of cleaning up tobacco spit from these slobs where they have their meetings, whether it's above the store or whatever. And, he gets the word of wisdom, which is so inspired that that I've had to make videos about that. Yeah. So that, and then when I ran into what was it? The Wives of Joseph Smith.org, and found out that he'd taken 11 dudes' wives. Per LDS doctrine, stole their wives for all eternity, being sealed to other guys' wives, which leaves them in the quandary of needing a new wife, for they don't have any participation in godhood, potentially. They are not participating in the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. He just stole their wives for all eternity. That's the LDS doctrine. And of course, when we get into the plurality of wives, the polygamy, that's never what's being discussed. We find that guys like Brian Hales from Fair Mormon, again, focus on something that pulls us into an area of the argument that becomes difficult to resolve. What they talk about is, oh, well, can you really prove Joseph Smith was having sex with all these women? Do you have DNA samples? Does he have children? You know, they make like, well, if he didn't have sex with these girls, it really doesn't matter. Well, if you don't mind your family being dissolved for all eternity, which is basically what we're taught the highest reward for being a faithful Mormon is, you know, then I guess who cares, right? But if you actually are in it to win it for eternity with your family, then Joseph Smith just destroyed the most important aspect and the central focus of our benefit of accessing the atonement and the blessings available in the temple. Yeah, so obfuscating the main point and focusing on some bullshit, that's how they do it. So anyway, right here, we're showing kind of a little reprimand of how Mormon culture is, not treated women quite as well as it should have. Well, basically, they've been actually treated like shit a lot of times by people like Brigham Young and lots of other people. However, the church is trying to appear more equitable now, and so that's being promoted. Here, the subtleties of how we need to improve and make Mormon culture equal to the eternal truths taught in God's holy temple. These are all being taught in such a way that you almost don't even realize what's hitting you here. But it's all putting sincerity and truth comes from the Lord and the church, and we cause our own problems.
Why did you keep this from me?
I don't know. I thought I'd get over it. Like, I thought it was like my mission, like that it was just propaganda or something.
But you didn't get over it, did you?
No.
And you kept it from me for 6 months.
The music. This is a production. Putting a lot of money into
I should have told her earlier.
convincing us of certain things here. Creating feelings.
The day after I talked to Jess, I tried to get an appointment with the scholar my dad knew. But he was out of town at some conference. So I emailed him, and he got back to me. He said go to a website. There was lots of stuff on the site. I plowed through it, and I called Ryan.
And it's Fair Mormon. They've got the answers because they've got real scholars. I was going to call Ryan. He's like, sorry, bro. Yeah, busy doing important shit like playing sports. Good luck with your bitch.
Hang on, guys. Justin, what's up?
Yo. Hey, I just found this website that I think you should check out. It's got some answers to the stuff we were talking about.
The Mormon site?
Kinda. I mean, it's by Mormon scholars.
Yeah, you're wasting your time. They're just gonna keep feeding you the party line.
Okay. Who are you checking?
Okay, So, for those of us who are aware that the apologetics on Fair Mormon are dishonest, and also those on LDS.org, we are going to be portrayed as rather dismissive. We expect him to look at our websites, but when it comes to us being, reciprocating with being fair at watching fair, well, no. So we're just showing this guy as a slightly less character. He's not a Gadianton robber. He's just, he's not as sincere as our boy and his daddy and his wife. He's a typical anti-Mormon, closed-minded. He knows he's got it all figured out. He's not willing to look at what those good scholars on Fair Mormon are going to show us, that will eventually clear things up just enough to know that if we pray about it, and we can choose to believe in good conscience. That's where it's going to get us to here, which is bullshit.
Maybe. You know what?
You remember that guy I was telling you about from Chicago, the scholar? I basically agree with him. I mean, you can't trust any of these so-called Mormon scholars. They're just gonna keep feeding you.
Okay, but so then where does that leave us? We can just listen to ex-Mormon and anti-Mormons as if they're not incredibly biased? Really? I mean, they're as antagonistic as you get.
Yeah, I agree they're antagonistic, but you can't trust pro-Mormon sites. They're all apologetics.
Fine, but in the spirit of intellectual honesty, we can afford to look at both sides. I looked at your stuff. I think you can take 10 minutes and look at mine.
Yeah, well, maybe. Anyway, text me the site. Maybe I'll take a look at it.
Hey, did you talk to Jessica? You did. How'd that go?
It didn't go very well. She's not talking to me right now.
Tough. Dude, I'm glad I'm not married.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're not married either. And I'm really glad that I am married, so I just am an idiot. I shouldn't have...
Thanks for helping me screw up my marriage, bro, listening to your anti-Mormonism bullshit. But I can see now you really, don't care that much. You're just going to go play your sports, and now I'm stuck with this because I bothered to, help your lame ass. Or try to.
You're in the dark this long.
No, you shouldn't have. I agree. Hey, man, I gotta go. We're gonna start the game. So, text me that site, and, maybe I'll take a look at it. I'm not promising anything.
Okay.
Yeah, not promising anything. So, yeah, just, like I said, very subtly painting him in the light of somebody who's less sincere than this guy. And believe it or not, these are important factors, because Fair Mormon is all about helping us feel that the church is more sincere and that anti-Mormons are just totally fucking biased. And, when it really comes down to it, not open to intellectual honesty. Well, you know what? The gospel isn't supposed to be about intellectual honesty, is it? It's supposed to be about praying and obeying. But when we find out they've lied to us, now intellectual honesty is going to have to be on the table.
But, you did get me into all this, so I feel like you can take a little bit of time to look at this if I send it to you.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, gotta go.
All right, look at the site.
Always looking out for me, aren't you, Mom? Thanks, man.
Later, I stopped by Dad's house. He said he'd look through some of the stuff on the site his friend recommended. So you told Mom about all this yet?
I haven't told her. You okay if I do?
If you want. Though I already know what she'll say. She'll say that I'm wasting time, that I should be doing service or something instead of this.
From what I remember, your mother's usually right.
She thinks everything comes down to a spiritual quest. She'll say this is a waste of time.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. It's like a waste of time. But actually, when you think about it, they're kind of right. Why are we wasting our time, right? Why should we have to spend our time searching for this stuff? Why hasn't anyone mentioned it before?
I don't think anyone's intentionally trying to keep things from us.
Now that he's shown how sincere he's been all along, we should trust what he says now. I don't think anyone's tried to intentionally keep this from us. Really? We just, hid the seer stone in the first presidency vault for 100 and some years, right? We just showed pictures of Joseph Smith looking at golden plates in the ensign as if he was pondering their meaning instead of having his rock head in a hat with a rock, which is just something they did to pawn this bullshit off on people back then when actually he already had the content. Did he memorize it day by day from what his, co-authors had written? Parents, family, friends, whoever? Don't know. But I don't think he got it off the rock either. Well, I'm quite confident he didn't get it off the rock. Not that you can't channel, but the rock gave him a lot of fouled up information.
To be perfectly honest with you, it's pretty boring.
And lots of plagiarism. Oh, it's so boring to look into these things. This is not an easy way to go. In the end, it would have been so much better for this guy if he never listened to his anti-Mormonism friend, because after he looks at enough stuff, he'll just decide that he was back where he started in the first place. Just pay, pray, and obey.
Look here, all these articles about the Book of Abraham, and only 9,500 people have taken the time to look at it.
Yeah, well, too bad for you. You already said you'd look at it with me, so you have to.
Yeah, I will. Boring as it is. Will be 9,502.
Thanks, Dad. Now you kind of feel like a traitor a little bit, looking at all this stuff. Kind of feel like I've crossed over to the dark side.
Yes, because the brethren have warned you. Don't go off of LDS.org, just like the Watchtower says. Don't go off of JW.org. Nope, you've caused yourself these troubles venturing into anti-Mormon waters. You could have avoided all this. Now you're going to have to be sentenced to wade through lots of boring shit so that you can quell those questions that came up that shouldn't be there in the first place. Because Joseph Smith was an honorable man. We know that from our priesthood manuals. Never mind all those dumb bitches that just said he was an egotistical narcissist who couldn't stop talking about himself and wanted to screw everyone in sight. Not that that's necessarily terrible, other than the fact that he had to freaking lie to him and said God commanded it and coerce people. If they just wanted the guy because they're after an alpha male and his pheromones were getting to him, who knows? But the guy was an asshole. That we know. But not from our priesthood manuals. Because they're not honest.
You don't think you've crossed over to the dark side, do you?
Seriously?
Kind of. Look, I'm going to show you a video. Some people talking about how they feel when they find out about some of this stuff.
John DeLean.
So my point isn't to cast stones or dispersions on the church. I'm just trying to get you to think about what your loved one is going through right now. And I want you to think about what the gap is between what they were taught, what their understanding was growing up in the church.
He doesn't want to cast dispersions on the church. Obviously he does. So now, why are they showing that? But then John always acts like, oh, the brethren are not bad people. They're just caught up in this stuff in the culture. They're honestly trying to be good people, but it's just difficult. Yeah. They're not Luciferian Freemasons lying to us intentionally using neurolinguistic programming and hypnotic language like I've shown them doing. No. They're just, they're just products of the culture.
And what they've recently discovered. The gap is huge, and it's very troubling and disturbing. So how do they feel when they discover all
How do they
this?
feel? That's
They
what's
feel
important to
stuck.
Mormons. How do you
They feel
feel?
betrayed.
You
They
feel
lied
betrayed?
to.
Lied to?
It was a couple of days before Dad and I visited
Like
the
his
scholar in
wife?
the ward.
Those videos are bothering me now.
On the website I told you about?
I didn't see any videos there, mostly papers. I tried reading some of them, but I'm no scholar.
We're not qualified to
Yeah,
find out if the gospel is true. That's why we just have to pray, because we're just stupid humans. You'd have to be an Egyptologist to really understand this question.
Showed him some of the videos that I'd seen. I mean, you can pretty much find them anywhere online.
I watched a bunch of them just to see what it was about. Most of them seemed kind of silly.
Yeah, but there are some that make good points, right? Like there's one on the Book of Abraham that's, I don't know, it seems like it makes a compelling argument.
Okay, so most of this anti-Mormonism stuff, it's a bunch of horse shit. But, there are a few things that can shake our faith. They got a few points among all the horse shit that these people put out. These people who are just not as faithful as we are, as faithful as they should have been, who have delved into these uncharted waters against the advice of the prophets and caused all this trouble. And now this guy hasn't had sex for a week because his wife isn't talking to him because, he just tried to protect her from some of this to make sure he wasn't poisoning her unnecessarily.
And now I don't know what to think of the Book of Abraham.
Goddamn anti-Mormons.
What do you think?
Well, let's take a look at one of the videos I told you about on that website.
That website. Who should we listen
If you're going
to?
to deal with the Book of Abraham,
We should look at the facts and not let these guys frame the argument for us. We should not be conditioned by sentiments about whether someone has good or bad intentions. We should notice techniques, and we should compare facts, raw facts, as often as possible. Like, is the information in the Book of Abraham true or not? That way, regardless of where it came from, the result is it's full of shit, so you can't trust anyone from heaven to have been in charge of this to be an honest God. That's the bottom line, because the buck stops there. We've been told Joseph Smith is a true prophet of a true and loving God, whose history, if we look at, isn't that impressive at all, being a psychopathic, narcissistic murderer of women, children, men, families, and even gays.
You both have to be a very good Egyptologist and a very good church historian. And anyone who's not both isn't really equipped to deal with the issues. And so you have all sorts of people who found someone who they think is credible and they parrot the information, they're well-intentioned, but they end up putting out things that aren't true. And I've talked with some of these people, some of them have changed things on their website and so on because they're honest, well-intentioned people. But there are good people who encounter these arguments
who get confused by dumb shits that just parrot stuff without really investigating. Well, that does happen, and it happens on both sides of this. I see so many people just parrot shit. Joseph Smith's just a con man and a pedophile. Pedophile. Is that how the British say it? Yeah. People do parrot things. And that discredits those of us who research things a little bit more thoroughly. Was Joseph Smith a pedophile? That's something that just puts you at risk to say. Is it pedophilia? to coerce a 14-year-old to have sex with you? Tell her that your salvation and hers and her family's are on the line? That's not pedophilia, is it? That's coercion. That's misuse of the false authority one has in a position. Pedophilia is, forcibly doing something to a child that is not old enough to get married in any culture at any time. And a 14-year-old could get married. She could make a choice. However, that doesn't excuse Joseph Smith in what he did. What he did was wrong because he used coercion. Total coercion. Took advantage of people's belief that he was their ticket to eternal life with their family. That's what the real crime was, but mislabeling it as pedophilia. There's plenty of pedophilia that goes on in the church. So when we mislabel things like that, it helps discredit all the true claims of pedophilia that these priesthood brethren are involved with, that is being covered up institutionally. So all these mischaracterizations are typical of the church and any high budget organization like LDS, the Catholics, JWs, that try to poison our minds, saying, oh, you have to be an Egyptologist to get through this. No, all you got to know is that, the word Egypt didn't even exist, so it shouldn't be in there. The word Jehovah didn't exist, it shouldn't be in there. Thing after thing, you notice, that is wrong with it. That doesn't require you to be an Egyptologist. I don't have to be an Egyptologist to know that the Egyptologists know how to translate Egyptian, and that even if Joseph Smith wasn't looking at the same papyrus that they say he was, or wasn't, he gave us an entire Egyptian alphabet translation, which was 100% wrong. Well, we'll just ignore that. And he lied to us, saying that this came from the hand of Abraham, when it was at least a millennia, closer to 2, I believe, sooner or closer to our time than that. But they ignore the inconvenient points here and find something that they can criticize and then characterize it all as something that we just can't figure out without prayer.
And then they have a crisis of faith. And I talk with either them or their parents, their friends, their relatives, something like that. A couple of times a week, I'm learning about someone else who's struggling with the Book of Abraham. And it's why I've kind of given my life to this, because there's so many good folks who are prevented from finding the truth because they don't know where to find it. And I want to help them. And I find that once they realize that all of these arguments that seem so compelling are based on 1 or 2 assumptions that are demonstrably incorrect, and then we start to show them, especially, that it's clear that Joseph Smith is not translating from the text around facsimile 1. That's the big issue for most of them. And when we can make it clear, and it is, historically it is clear that's not what he's translating from, then all of the other issues...
Right, we have Jason in...
from the text around facsimile 1. That's the...
Okay. Even though I've just shown that doesn't really matter, we've still got the problem that none of it's correct in the first place. If he's not translating from something near or having to do with facsimile 1, then why does he reference them in the text and show us facsimile 1, in which he calls these jars for throwing organs in of the person they're embalming, in what this really is in the Book of Breathings? Why does he call them the gods? Libna, Mamakra, Koresh, and what the god of whatnot, right? That's still inaccurate, I think, in what that guy's saying.
Big issue for most of them. And when we can and make it clear, and it is, historically, it is clear that's not what he's translating from, then all of the other issues actually just vanish once you get...
It's not what he's translating from. He's not translating it correctly, that's for damn sure. There is nothing that he's translating from, because there's none of this shit has anything to do with some phony guy named Abraham 2000 BC. So that was, they make it sound like, they came up with something there that saves all this, but they didn't.
Get rid of that assumption.
I'm beginning to understand, but it's complex.
But it's not really that complex.
To you,
Is it to you, Justin?
Yeah, it's, I don't know, I feel like you get, a smart group of people over here telling you one thing, and then you have, these scholars over here saying the total opposite, and everyone's saying you can't trust the other people, and...
You can't trust, so you gotta trust the Spirit. It's not about trust, it's about comparing facts that you can compare.
I don't know. Obviously they can't all be right.
Which they keep ignoring.
Well, that just means you're going to have to sort this through for yourself.
and keep studying.
Yeah. Study it out intellectually until you come to a point you think it's true. And then put it to a spiritual test.
Well, you won't think it's true if you actually compare the facts. And then the Holy Ghost will let you know. And if he doesn't, it's because you're unworthy.
While you're doing this, though, you're going to have to set aside your false assumptions. You really must give up the false assumptions.
The false assumptions? Oh, okay. So what we're doing right there is we're making the false assumption that everything that says the church is lying to us is false. That's how they do this. A lot of times they'll create a question with a false assumption in it. Like, why does God care so much about families? That's assuming God exists, and it's assuming God cares about families, which he obviously freaking doesn't. Why did the Savior teach such profound truths in the Mount of Olives or Transfiguration or the Sermon on the Mount? Well, there's no historical evidence that that ever occurred and that the guy ever even existed. But you build in something as if it's a truth within a question so that you don't focus on the fact that that was unestablished in the first place. Got it? Kwaku and Three Mormons do it all the time. Oh my God, I've sinned. I called them Three Mormons. They're saints unscripted? Unscripted. Yeah, I'm sure they're unscripted.
Yeah, but I feel like that highlights the problem, right? Like, you start giving up one thing, then you give up the next, and pretty soon, like, I'm afraid you're going to give up everything that you were ever taught about the church.
I think he's saying you'll have to give up some things.
Yeah. And then you find out what really matters. I've seen this happen over and over again. At first, someone starts to study church history, and it seems to pull them away. But as they keep studying, it actually draws them back again.
Okay.
Really? Does it sound like I've been drawn back again? Because I've probably studied more than, 99.9% of the church has. There are plenty of people that have studied a lot, and it's Sunday morning, and I'm pretty sure they're not at church. Although there are a few who are clueless enough to follow what fairmormon tells them. And notice, or not notice, fail to notice, that they're talking in circles.
So how would you answer this then? Ryan says that he never felt closer to God and Christ than when he was on his way out of the church.
Well, I can't speak for Ryan. But maybe that was God reaching out to him in his time of need. What does he think about God now?
Yeah, I don't know. That's just it. Like, he actually says he doesn't really think about God much anymore.
All right, and this is going on the assumption they call God, like God. What God? Who's God? You know, we're all supposed to realize that the Christian God, adapted to Mormonism, is real. And it's just, we're being thoughtless, not thinking about him, It's like I have a personal relationship with the tooth fairy. You say that, you're going to have problems. They're going to try to throw you in a nut house. I got a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Well, that's just fine. But there's no evidence that either one of these actually exist. But culturally, we're taught to believe Jesus Christ is real. So we'll just give God and Jesus names and pretend that they're actually there. Your special invisible friend.
Maybe he quit searching too soon.
Yeah.
So I kept studying. And Dad did too. He watched more of the videos on the site this scholar recommended, and actually started reading some of the articles.
Bless Daddy. Daddy. With all his schoolwork. Schoolwork. And with all his problems. Problems. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Good job.
Good job. Yeah, that's how we really do it, folks. That's how we do it. Jesus will make it all better. With all his problems. Because good, sincere people let go and let God.
Into bed. Good night. Sweet dreams. I love you.
People that pray to Jesus are great ones. Oh, Heavenly Father, in the name of Jesus. Sorry, we're talking Mormonism here.
I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. I should have trusted you. I'm just really sorry.
And I'm sorry about the other night. I just...
Okay. So my dad's friend gave me a website that we could go look at. It's got some videos on it that I think can help us out.
Okay. But first I want to know what bothered you. Here, let's get the laundry in. Come on.
She wanted to know about all of it. The Book of Abraham, the various of the First Division, the videos I'd seen, what I'd read. Everything.
Right.
Some are still legitimate.
Okay, but what exactly are these issues with the Book of Abraham?
You want me just tell you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So,
What else?
You want me to, just list them out, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Egyptologists say that they've looked at Joseph's translation of the facsimile and that he didn't get anything right. And they say that he tried to create an Egyptian alphabet and he got everything wrong. And they date the papyrus 1,000 years after Abraham. And Joseph said it was written by the hand of Abraham. And essentially there's no corroborating evidence that for the Book of Abraham, and just all this evidence against it.
So what are you saying?
Well, I'm not saying anything, right? They're the ones saying it, but they say that this proves that, he's a false prophet, that he's a fraud.
Oh.
Yeah, and it does. But we're going to get redirected into fair Mormon trying to obfuscate the issue by saying, oh, well, he's looking at the wrong papyrus. Once again, it doesn't matter what he's looking at. If it's a crystal ball, a Ouija board, or a papyrus, if the information that he channels or translates is wrong, provably wrong. It doesn't matter what any of that is if he tries to augment his presentation to impress people by creating a phony translation of the Egyptian alphabet. He created a fraudulent translation of the Egyptian alphabet, pretended to have special powers from the Israelite God to do this as a sales tool to present along with the Book of Abraham translation, as it's generously called. The church loves to control the argument and focus upon something that will send us into a situation where we just can't be sure, and then we'll have to pray. And then we can choose to believe, is what they will eventually tell us here. And that is a matter of manipulation, and that's what they do on Fair Mormon. Otherwise, the obvious and simple thing to do here would be to test what we've got. We've got a false Egyptian alphabet, and we've got false information throughout the Book of Abraham. That's what we've got. And we've got a false prophet who lied about everything else. In the name of the age of reason, amen. In the meantime, they've made us feel like anti-Mormonism from anti-Mormons, however well-intended some of us might be, have caused a great deal of pain and consternation to these poor people who are going to have to figure it out, wading through such difficult and boring texts, and then choose to believe, when they could have just kept the argument very simple, as I just mentioned. But honesty isn't what the church is about, and it never was. Creating sentiments towards those of us who tell the truth is what their intent is here, to paint us as those who cause all this pain, when in fact it's the brethren.